Okay. All right, thanks, Sunny. Okay, is the presentation up, Jeff? Yes, okay, great. So let's get going. So the whole point of today is to tell you what's new and different in our high performance building standard. If this whole standard is new for you, this is a self-authored high performance building standard that the first version of was drafted in 2015. That's when the state of Utah decided to move away from LEED as our standard and create our own standard. But it's very similar as we go through the sections of the standard. Again, if this is your first introduction to our standard, it follows it's very similar to the LEED setup with the same types of sections and whatnot. The thing that's a little different, well, it was in 2015. The newest version of LEED has moved in this direction a little bit. Is we have the criteria for performance, you know, the things we're looking for out of our buildings, but we also have quite a bit of process information in the standard. So we're telling you what we want, and in a lot of ways, we're giving you some great pathways and tools to tell you how to get there. So a little bit about the process that got us to today with the new standard. Started out a couple years ago. We sort of did an assessment of the old high performance building standard. It was proven to be successful and attainable standard, so that indicated it was time to move the needle again a little bit. That included 4 years of lessons learned, and a lot of some new tech that's been considered and incorporated when appropriate into the new standard. DFCM, i.e. Jeff and I, did not do this by any means on our own. We worked with about a dozen experts in the field to draft the new standard. And then after we had a draft that we were happy with, we sent it out to peer review to local industry professionals. And you can see on this slide, there's just a selection of who those people were. And we got some great feedback and we responded to that. And then we finished our final draft of it. And then we presented the standard to the Utah State Building Board. They recommended adoption of the standard. And so here we are. We have a new standard to work with. One point of clarification on how this will apply moving forward is that no project that we have like in play right now will adopt this. It will continue to work on the old standard. This will apply to any new project, new funded project this session moving forward. This is just a really, really high level of some of the big changes, but we will dig into these more. At the very end, we'll show you our new State of Utah plaque of recognition for achieving these standards. We really focused a lot in this update on providing a set of documentation to reflect that the standard has been met. There is a new energy use intensity design goal for energy performance. In building design and envelope commissioning, we pulled in the need to look at thermal bridging when appropriate, which we did not have in our old standard. We have a new scaling matrix of how to right size commissioning, both for building systems and building envelope commissioning, which has always been a struggle traditionally in the past, trying to right size that scope of work. We've also just made a big effort to make the standard easier to follow and comply with. Some of the feedback that we got through that peer review process, we're showing these just to give you some concrete examples of that we did get feedback, and then kind of an understanding of how we viewed those feedback items and our response to them. One of the comments we got back was one reviewer felt that the ADA requirement should be added to the standard. Our response to that is ADA is a code requirement, and we don't want to duplicate other standards or other code related items in this standard, because then you constantly have to make sure when one is updated, the other is updated, and it can just get confusing. There is a link in the new standard to performance ratings for the AE teams and for the contracting teams. and there was a lot of questions about that, like what does that mean? Performance ratings are very important to our industry partners. And so the answer to that is it means we've in every section, we now have an identified deliverable, and the deliverables need to be turned in at the end of the project. And then our input to your performance rating would be, at full marks. There's some language as well about if a project doesn't meet the performance criteria in this new standard, which we also now have a process of how we want that to be measured after the project is complete, then what do we do? Some of this will just be a continuation of warranty. That's one of the reasons that we focus so much on commissioning, is if we can find it in that first year, it can be remediated under warranty, and it's still considered a successful project. That's not a new process. We're just trying to monopolize or capitalize on it even more. And then if there's a bigger issue, we're just going to sit down with the project team again and have a discussion and try and pinpoint where there were issues and if there is a remediation path or not. And then there was a request for some more detailed documentation from the general contractors, specifically around material management and waste management. We had some really robust discussions about that, but we worked really hard as well on this update to not create, we felt like we codified work that already was happening or should have been happening, and not create additional work that would create an administrative burden that would make any part of the project team feel like they needed to increase their fees. So this is the, again, broad overview here. Why did we update it, or why do we have this standard at all? And you're going to see this intent, compliance, notable changes, and deliverables all throughout the sections. The intent, compliance, and deliverables is now the format of the standard itself. And this is part of us trying to make it easier to follow through and feel like you know how to meet the requirements you're asking for. So, the basic reason for this standard is we want to have better building performance, and we want to reduce the total cost of ownership. Compliance is you follow and meet the requirements of the standard. Some notable changes are those deliverables are tied to AE and GC fees and performance ratings. And then there's a number of deliverables. It's basically all of the appendices, but two of the sort of the big main ones are the first appendices. Appendix A is a checklist that helps you follow through the standard and make sure you're meeting all of the requirements at each project phase and project milestone. And then we focus really heavily on the OPR, the owner's project requirements, and then the basis of design, which is the response from the design team to those requirements. There's a lot of checking back in with those two documents all throughout the standard. And at the end, it should be that OPR and that BOD should reflect the product that was created. Okay, now we're going to get into the specifics. All right. And this is where Jeff takes over for a while.
Yeah, good morning to everybody. So now we're going to go through the standard itself and go through each section. To start out, just so everybody knows where to find the information, there's a couple of screenshots here that show on our website where they're found. First of all, under standard documents on the construction management page, there's the design requirements. That includes all of the design requirements. The high performance building standard is actually chapter 5 of that. So you'll find them there. And then the next place you'll find them, I want to go ahead, Sarah, and bump it forward. On the actual high performance building page, you'll see the link up in the top. It says Energy HPBS. That's where you'll find just the requirement itself, or just the high performance building standard chapter 5. And then also you'll see the link to the various appendices that Sarah already mentioned. There's 7 of them, A through G, and we'll of course touch on those, some more, some less, as we go through this presentation. So starting at the top of the standard, in the very beginning, we kind of just lay out the purpose and the compliance, of course, the intent, as Sarah mentioned already, for the entire standard is to improve building performance and reduce the cost of ownership. I think it's important for people to understand that really this is about saving taxpayer dollars in the long run. I think most of you understand that. You know, we do like to see high efficiency and good sustainable design, but the goal really is saving taxpayer dollars throughout the life cycle of a building. And then and under compliance in the first section, as Sarah already mentioned, there's our new requirement that you know, or I guess in order to receive the full design fees and full performance rating, you know, we'll want to make sure that all of the deliverables have been submitted and are you know, in order. So section 5.1 is about integrated design process, where we lay out what we mean by that. And really the gist of this is that we intend for this process, you know, not just the high performance aspect, but really the entire construction process to be a highly integrated process. And we want to bring the team together to discuss these things. And you know, the key members of the team, I mean, really is everybody, but you know, we really want the architect to engage with the facilities folks, you know, of course, us on the high performance side, DFCM, all of the sub consultants, and bring them in as appropriate at each stage of design and construction to make sure that the standards met. So one thing that we'll be pushing for is really early engagement with the high performance building requirements. It's never too early, in my opinion. I'll of course be promoting this from inside with our own project managers, but we'll want to be holding meetings to start establishing the OPR and basis of design documents right off the bat. We'll probably, even if we have a feasibility study, want to at least discuss some of these things and engage very early. And then really compliance, or sorry, the deliverables, again, are the, like Sarah mentioned before, and you'll see this throughout, that checklist A, and then updating of the OPR and BOD documents at each phase of the project. Okay, so section 5.2, this is where we get into the actual requirements of the standard. The first few sections are more of a sustainability focus, and starting with community-oriented design. And the intent of this section is to review, we want the design team to understand the community vision for what's going on, so that the project can mesh with that overall vision. So it's a review of all the various master plans that are available. And then, you know, summarizing those findings in the documents. And one of the things we address in here is looking at pathways, in particular those that relate to the surrounding community, to make sure those things are well identified and safe. And again, the deliverables here are that checklist updated, and then the OPR and BOD updated throughout design. Section 5.3 is transportation management. And I'll say here that you know, we've noted the notable changes throughout this. Some sections we'll go through are very much the same as what the old high performance building standard had, and of course very much aligned with LEED and those kind of standards. On this section, the intent is to reduce the impact of single occupant vehicles. So we have standards around parking allowances, providing bike racks, and then we have that familiar list of options to choose from that may or may not make sense to the various projects. And of course, we've all had projects we've been involved in where it's a struggle to come up with maybe all of the different things that are recommended. And this is, of course, highlights the importance of that OPR document and those discussions that we'll have throughout the process. Really what we want to do is make the most common sense, best decisions we can, have those reflected in the OPR, BOD, and design documents, and then stick to those things that the whole integrated team agrees on. And so here, the notable changes for this section compared to the old HPBS is we used to have a requirement for a sustainable site plan that was submitted, is supposed to be submitted to the performance group. That's no longer required. And we've also eliminated the requirement specifically for carpools and fuel efficient vehicles. It's still in the list of options, but as far as like a required element, that's no longer there. Section, and again, the deliverables, that checklist A and the updated OPR and BOD. Section 4 is site design. The intent here with this section is to enhance the access, flow, and function of the site and reduce the environmental impact of the site. And the topics we cover here are orientation, how the building is, situated on the site. We want to make sure that, again, those vehicle and bicycle pedestrian, the circulation is clear, it's pedestrian oriented and safe. We're looking for meaningful outdoor spaces, places where people can gather, things that we want them to be thought through, well designed to meet the needs of the building occupants when they're outdoors. And then we also slightly address landscaping and irrigation, but it really points back to the design standard in general. We're looking at stormwater, reducing heat island effect, and light pollution. Again, all that stuff is very similar to what we've had in the past. HPBS very much aligns with LEED. And again, the notable change here is we had that requirement for the sustainable site plan, which is no longer there. And the deliverables, once again, that Appendix A updated, and the OPR and BOD updated throughout design and construction as necessary. And now at this point, we're going to move from the general sustainability topics into the performance aspects. In chapter 5 or section 5 of chapter 5 is all about building performance. And now I'll turn it over to Sarah to discuss energy modeling.
Thank you. So again, this is one of the big changes with the new standard is our outcome-based performance target for energy efficiency is now, the preferred pathway is now to design to a specific EUI. And once I talk through this, like the language of this, this is where we'll have Chris Cox jump in and walk through the tool that's been created to help design teams work through this. And so I think the walking through the tool makes this really clear. But at the same time, we recognize that an EUI target doesn't work for every type of building. A research lab building is a good example. There's many different types of research buildings, and they have widely different energy usage. So for those type of outliers, we still have the old performance cost index goal, but we did update it. So it used to be 20% in ASHRAE 2010, I think. But now we're looking for a performance cost index that is at least 15% lower than that index when calculated against ASHRAE 90.1 2016. And the way you comply with this is either way, you're going to be doing modeling to show it. And then I forgot to add this on this slide for the EUI outcome. Part of the compliance is we will measure the performance of the building in conjunction with the commissioning team. We're after occupancy, and we're going to be looking for 12 months of occupied data. We're hoping to collect that data within the first 2 years of occupancy, because we do recognize that sometimes those first couple months in a building don't really represent how the building is going to perform over time. So we gave a little bit of leeway there. Again, notable changes here are we do have this outcome-based performance target that will be measured. And we have this very specific now final compliance report. Again, deliverables, you guys are going to get sick of this by the end of this 2 hours, but update the OPR and the BOD at all the design phases, the energy model, Appendix D, which we're about to go through. And then there will be, if there needs to be a deviation from this, we'd be looking for some sort of written validation for why, and the final compliance report, which will be that 12 months of energy use in the building that will help gather through the commissioning team. I think with that, yeah, Chris, do you want to hop up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully you can share. Totally.
Okay.
Awesome.
Can you see my project energy performance statement here?
Sure
Here's your
can.
spreadsheet. Okay, great. Okay. So first, I'm going to start with our. So this worksheet's going to be used to document that you're on track for performance in your design stage, as well as document compliance in the final stage. So ideally, we're going to have an energy model. We're going to put in some of the information from that energy model, put in the energy predictions into this worksheet. And then at the very end, once we've commissioned the building, it's operational for 12 months. You could even check in 3 months, 6 months. We have some flexibility there, just to document that this building does perform as it was designed to. So we're holding buildings to a EUI target. And for folks that are less familiar with EUI targets, I think the analogy I like to use is vehicle mile per gallon target. So everybody can tell me what they think their car gets in miles per gallon. Let's use that easy analogy and think about, let's translate that over to the building energy world and just think in performance targets. So to work through this project, you're going to enter in your project title, your number, how much is new construction, renovation, number of stories, your addition floor area, total gross floor area. You're going to have some flexibility here to type in or kind of scroll down, select the type of building, and select your climate zone. So I have all the Utah climate zones in here. And that's just going to pull this lookup table, which comes from over here. And it's going to assign a source EUI target to the project. And just for reference, for the most part, what the targets are is essentially targeting to be 25% better than the average building stock for CBEX. So we're going to list our simulation program, what the principal heating source is, any district heating, cooling type systems, the weather file, things like that. So things that are pretty normal. Most energy modelers will be able to provide this fairly simply. Again, here are our source targets. And in certain cases, we see a need for, let's just say that we build a government office that one floor is dedicated to recreation and fitness. Be a great scenario there. We can apply a weighted target. So if we wanted to say there was some type of medical office in there, we can apply a weighted average if we need to do so. So for your design submittal, I'm not asking a lot from modelers. The old forms requested a lot more information. Really what we're looking for is some high level data, letting us know that the project's on track. So tell me where it's located, how many, what the size of the project is, the type of building, number of floors again, your assumed occupant density, occupancy schedules, things like that. Like power density. If I see a 1 in, if I were reviewing this and I saw a 1 in here, I'd probably flag it and go, this does not look like it's on track. So, those high level things, what do we assume for receptacle load density, light power density? What are window to wall ratios? So the standard does require 30%. Let's say we got an exception and I saw a 60% in here. I might flag that. So really this is just looking for those high level items that are telling me that this project appears to be on track to be a high performing building. We're gonna give a quick overview of what the heating cooling system sounds like. If we were just going with traditional VAV with electric reheat, let's say, I would know for a fact we're not on track. So again, just kind of high level items that we want to make sure the project's on track. Based on that model, you're going to enter in that energy data. We can account for metered natural gas, electricity, steam, hot water, chilled water. And there's this other section if there's an energy source we didn't account for. This does apply the EPA's site to source conversion factors and calculates the, we'll highlight that there, what the model predicts as the source EUI. It compares it to the target. So this is showing we're on track. We're estimated account come in just under. So as far as the design submittal, I'm quite happy with that. I see that we have a project that's on track. Now let's say we get into our, we've commissioned the building. Our commissioning agent is watching the building. They're collecting energy data, and they want to enter this in. I've left some option to start calculating it and kind of extrapolating the data into putting in predictions at 3 month, 6 month, 9 month, all optional, but I think it's a good practice. I'd like to think that the energy consultant and the commissioning agents could start talking through this, how best to make these projections, just to make sure you're on track. It'd be a shame to get 12 months down the line and we've missed the mark. I mean, that would be kind of a shame. So in the end, what we're hoping to get is 12 months of data, verified data at the meter, and looking at this comparison showing that we are above or below. So there's that. And then the final submittal would be, again, just kind of if there were any changes, let's say we ended up with more glass or we're running the building a lot longer, things we can account for. And then, so this would be actual meter data as compared to the target. This would also report on the expected emissions resulting from the project. We're going to start tracking this. We're not doing anything with it at the moment, but just tracking what we expect the annual emissions will be. And so this is our final submission as far as this building meets the energy performance target. That's it, Sarah. Any questions on that, Sarah? Is there anything you want me to cover?
I think this is a good spot to maybe pause and see if there are questions.
Yeah, scanning through the chat, I haven't seen any questions pop up. So yeah.
Okay.
By chat or by voice. We'll
okay.
Yeah. And I am going to throw it out there that if we need to hold a breakout session with just the energy modelers in the audience, happy to do so, just to walk you through some of the details here. And we could really just kind of dive into, make an hour session of just this energy performance modeling and what the expectation is here.
Okay. Great. Moving right along. At this piece, we will not take 2 hours, which is okay. Okay, so jumping back into the rest of the standard, The next section is about water use reduction. Obviously, the intent here is to minimize water consumption. To be in compliance, we're looking at landscaping and irrigation, a minimum amount of turf, creating a water budget from WaterSense. The landscape architect needs to provide a maintenance schedule. For interior plumbing, again, we want WaterSense fixtures, and we don't want ones through processed water. And we do know that there are areas where there's already known exceptions for that, like labs and hospitals. This section has not really changed substantially from the old HPBS, so that's pretty much it for water. And again, the deliverables here are the checklist and the correct information in the OPR, and then the response in the BOD. So this is where we had decided to build in a little break. I think, Jeff, we're getting through this a little faster than we thought, which is not a bad thing.
Hey, Sarah, I have a couple questions I threw in the chat.
Okay, why don't you just ask them, Sunny?
Sorry.
Jeff,
Yeah.
oh,
What
yes.
happens if the building doesn't hit the EY? And what's the expectation of the commissioning agent at that point, at the end of 12 months?
So if after we get that 12 months of data that, you know, the commissioning agent and me and Jeff and the energy modeler feel reflect like normal usage of the building, if the building's over the EUI, we would want to have a meeting with the project team, try to figure out what is causing that, and hopefully we could, right? Like Chris mentioned something, I think, like there's 25% more occupants in the building than the design team was led to believe, or something like that. If we can pinpoint it and document it, and we say this accounts for more energy use and it makes sense, that's kind of the end of that. If we can't figure it out, we would hope and want the right members of the project team to do a little bit of investigation with us to try and find out what happened. At the end of the day, the point of the standard isn't like any kind of I gotcha or, you know, anything like that. We really just want the best buildings we can get. So we don't really want any, you know, we're not looking for blame or anything like that. We really just want the best building. So what we really ask for is just everybody works together to try and figure out what happened, and then document that if we can figure it out. So we understand that that is not a super like hard and firm answer, because it would be definitely a case-by-case situation. But we also need to be a little, like, we understand we need to be a little bit flexible. What else you got, Sunny?
That's it. I were just 2 questions. Yeah. Thanks.
So
Yeah.
this is Dave Griffin with Griffin Energy Consulting. I had a question.
Shoot.
Will the information and documentation that's put into the spreadsheet be added to a publicly available database for viewing by others?
You know, David, that's a great thought. We could probably definitely figure that out. And our information about what we do is all publicly available. It's, you know, in statute, so we definitely would share it any way we can. Yeah, we can definitely figure out a way to do that. I think it's a great suggestion.
This is Matt Wilson with Colvin Engineering. Got a question?
Go ahead.
In the old standard, there was a provision about if you couldn't meet the performance target if it was not life cycle cost effective. Is that into the new standard as well, or is it you need to meet the EUI come hell or high water?
Great question. Yes, Matt, we still are going to be working on a life cycle cost effective framework. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that's still that's still the basic framework. It will not become hell or high water.
Okay, TBD, I guess.
No, the language is still in the standard. We just didn't cover it today.
Perfect, thank you.
Sarah, this is Matt Garlick.
Yep.
Is the expectation that the modeler will kind of stay with the project for that full 2 years of observation?
No, once the modeling work is done, it sort of shifts over to the commissioning agent to gather data and record it in the last couple tabs of what Chris covered. The only instance where we would probably bring the modeler back into the conversation if it like doesn't meet, like really, doesn't meet what the modeler targeted, that person would be critical in the conversation, I think, of trying to figure out what happened. Does that make sense?
It does. I wonder if you might run into issues where you have an exceptional weather year, and of course we model with standard historic weather files, and
Yeah.
they may not compare to an exceptionally warm year or an exceptionally cool year.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we would easily figure out, through that, just kind of putting our heads together, right? Like all you guys can run a weather normalization probably in your sleep. So I think we could deal with that. I just have to tell you guys, Matt, Sunny, and Dave, that Chris Cox totally has your number. He was like, it's going to be the energy modelers who ask all the questions. Busted.
I have faith in Chris.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
Hey, Sarah, this is Lisa Dacus. I have a question.
Great.
I was wondering if you could expand on how and why you selected the EUI targets per building type.
Chris, I think that you will answer that better than I do.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that one. So part of it, I'd say 3 years ago, Sarah and I did a comparison of the DFCM building stock, and we took a look at the high performers, the low performers, and we even made some comparisons of ones that we thought would be high performers that didn't end up being high performers. So we compiled all this data on kind of DFCM building stock and saw where the top performers were kind of landing, and they were landing in that 25% better than the CBEX average, and wanted that to be the target. Now, in all cases, that can't be met. There are certain projects that are just more kind of plug load intensive. It's harder to get a 25% savings on a project like that. The ones that are, where you can manipulate things like the HVAC, the lighting, things like that. Those are the projects where you have, the ability to save 25% over that medium building stock. So we took a look at 3 standards. So first and foremost, it was CBEX. We wanted to look at average building stock. Then we looked at NBI, put together a guide that gave some direction here. They for the most part, that NBI guide was a little bit too aggressive. We saw that, most of what we were building in the state of Utah just wouldn't hit that mark. So weighted less heavily. And then there was also an ASHRAE standard 100, which is more reflective of what we would hope to achieve in a major renovation of the existing building stock. So we looked at those 3 sources, but again, that really the idea is we want to shoot for 25% better than the median building stock. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, thanks.
Anybody else? This is great.
There are a couple of questions from the chat. Going back up a little bit, Shamini Larson asked, or says estimated assemblies for thermal performance include walls and roof. What about soffit and floors?
That's going to happen in the model. Those generally have less of an impact. So in my spreadsheet calculation, I'm really looking for those larger ticket items that are really going to move the needle on energy performance. So So while we expect that that's going to happen in the model, so the modeler is going to be taking a look at that, or designers are taking a look at that, it's not necessarily anything I wanted to have that high level, image of the, or thought of the building going into that. So it's nothing that needs to be documented in the spreadsheet, but yeah, hoping the energy modeler and design team considers that.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question, Chris?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we have a project as an example, Huntsman Cancer, where the soffit is quite large. It makes up a significant portion of the envelope. Is there a case where you think that should work its way into that analysis tool?
Would you, I would say in that case, yeah, I think so. And don't think that, so my spreadsheet isn't an analysis tool. It's more just documenting some of those larger ticket items that really move the needle with energy performance. That should definitely make it into the energy model. And there are some provisions in our high performance building standard that talks about how to account for thermal bridging and things like soffits. So all of that should be happening in the model. I'm not sure I necessarily need that documented in this high level spreadsheet, just giving a review or a quick overview of the project. So again, in the model, absolutely. In my high level spreadsheet, I'm going to say no on that one.
Jeff, is there another question in the chat?
Yeah, there is one more question about LID requirements. I'm assuming that's low impact development within the high performance building standard and where they're found. I guess my quick answer to that would be just, when it comes to the various site impacts and whatever, just the items that we have listed in there is where they're found. I don't know, Brian, if you want to expound on that, or Whitney, if you have any comments to make.
Yeah, so in that site development section, there is a requirement for best management practices, which are in alignment with the low impact development strategy. So we do have that standard, and that is consistent with the previous iteration of the high performance building standard.
That's perfect, thank you.
So any more questions right now?
I have a question, and maybe this was covered earlier, at least in part, but for clarification, at the end of the process, if the EUI, operational EUI of the building differs from the estimated EUI from the energy model analysis, is the state interested in reconciling those two in order to improve the process moving forward? And if so, how is that documented? And will that information be shared with the public?
So yes, we would want to reconcile it. And when we say that, right, like if the EUI is, within I can't remember if this is in the language already, but if it's like within 10% of the model, we're just gonna probably say that's good, right? But so it would be if we really miss the mark in a substantive way. So we do want to reconcile the project, how it functions to the model, and figure out what the difference is. And maybe the explanation is as simple as weather variation or something. I'm not sure I understand the second half of your question, Dave, about like, are you suggesting that we might find out that we need to shift our EUI targets?
I think potentially, really, it was kind of open-ended, so I apologize for such a broad question. My interest lies in the lessons learned.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would just want to move the industry forward however we can. And so to be able to share those lessons learned with the larger, with the public and with other energy modelers or commissioning agents, I was wondering what the plan was to share those. Is that going to be through a series of webinars after the fact, or will that be how will that be shared?
Yeah, again, this is a great suggestion, Dave. I think Jeff and I are so tickled at actually finishing this bad boy up that we haven't really given a lot of thought to what happens once we actually give it a go a few times. But I like the suggestion of making that all publicly available. We do tend to do that. I mean, DFCM has a very informal way of sharing that information internally. But we would, if we really discover something that we feel could have a big impact on lots of different projects moving forward, yeah, we would have a webinar or write a case study or do something. We haven't really thought that through, but I like the idea of it.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in knowing about what that solution ends up being and getting on whatever mailing list or interested party list or whatever needs to happen in order to get a hold of that information.
Okay, good to know. Any other questions right now? Okay, that was great. So we'll work through the second half of this, and then I think this worked really well to kind of pause and get all the questions out. That flowed pretty good. So we'll finish up going through the rest of the standard, and then we'll have another round of this at the end. So moving right along.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break at this point, or go through another section first?
I feel like we could just keep going. I know we planned on taking a break, but I think we're going to finish up a little bit sooner than 2 hours. So.
All right. Sounds good. So yeah, the next section, 5.4, is all about building enclosure commissioning, BECX. So the intent, of course, of this is to comply with established standards and to meet the expectations that are set by the project team and the OPR. Compliance with this section. First of all, of course, DFCM, we will be hiring the enclosure commissioning agent as one of our consultants. We ideally would like to have this done before DD and probably even earlier than that, bringing them on board. But as far as engagement goes, we'd start that actually before schematic design, and then in all cases before design development. I'll bring up right here too that we have defined 2 different levels of BECX in the standard. There's a nice table in there that shows the various combinations of complexity and budget and which one applies, whether it's fundamental or enhanced. So what I go through now will basically be the enhanced requirements. But before I do that, basically, when it comes to a fundamental project, those that are of a lower budget or complexity, really we're looking at limited design reviews. We'll be doing in situ mock-ups and reviews, limited site observations, no post-occupancy follow-ups, no whole building air test, kind of what many of you have been used to on our smaller projects where we bring the consultant on and we want to have some good design review and good input, but we're really not going to be doing any kind of quantitative analysis in the end to make sure that the goals were met. So having said that, then all the comments going forward are really based on our full-blown enhanced envelope commissioning effort. So we move to the next slide. So like I said before, we want to start this as early as possible. The first real engagement will be during the SD phase. We'll of course try to bring our envelope consultant on as early as possible. But going on from there, really it's going to be that consultant's job early on to assist with the OPR, review and comment on the basis of design documents. We'll want to have a coordination meeting right up front and start working on developing that plan. And really it's all coordination at that point, just making sure that the design team and the project team and the performance building group and all of us are all on the same page as far as what the goals are shaping up to be. Then as we move into the rest of the design phase, development and then production of the construction drawings, then the drawing reviews will get more involved, ongoing coordination with the OPR and BOD documents. And then of course, when the bid set comes out, we'll be looking for those back check reviews against the previous comments to make sure everything has been addressed. Then in the pre-construction phase, we'll have our value engineering reviews, RFI reviews, submittal reviews, all that stuff. And here again, all of this stuff is familiar. It's nothing here has changed in what we do. Moving into construction, we'll have our mock-up review. We like to have a review before the mock-up and then testing after. Continued RFI reviews, field observations, and then of course moving into the functional performance tests at the end. And those functional performance tests will of course be defined in the envelope commissioning plan and will be recorded in the OPR and you know, all those good things. So now moving on to the performance guidelines, this is what we're looking for. Of course, we'll want reconciliation with the energy model. We're looking for 2 lines of defense against air and water. We've maintained our 30% maximum fenestration standard. And that, of course, is the window area as compared to the above grade wall area. For water, we need to control the water penetration and condensation. We'll be doing functional performing tests to see how that works out. The vapor, class 1 and 2 vapor retarders are required. We'll ask for a specific evaluation for climate zone 3. And there is typically no functional performance testing in this area, but the field observations. With air, we're looking for a continuous air barrier with a permeance less than 0.004 cm per square foot, air leakage less than 0.04 CFM per square foot. And then we have maintained our whole building air test standard at coming in equal or less to 0.10 CFM per square foot. And then we've got our familiar exceptions for like housing projects, of course, fundamental. Like I said before, we have no whole building air test. And then we have an exception for additions. All of this, of course, will be reviewed by the design team, the project team, and once again, reflected in the OPR. Then the last area of performance that we're looking for is thermal. You know, we have our insulation requirements that, of course, will be evaluated. And then new to the standard, we're looking at thermal bridging specifically. We want to account for thermal bridging. You know, our envelope consultants will be, of course, very helpful in that area, looking at all that and making sure that that it's accounted for in the numbers. Actually, right now, Shamini, Rick, I don't know if you're on. I don't know if you guys have any comments you'd like to make at this point regarding thermal bridging. It's kind of an important topic that you know, I don't want to go into extreme depth on right now, but if there's any comment you'd like to make in that area.
Hey, sure. This is Rick. Yeah, I think there is some good detail in the standard that summarizes kind of the specifics of what's required. It references some ISO standards as well as some other guidelines, but the point is that, thermal bridging will have to be accounted for. No longer can you get away with, continuous Z-girts through your exterior insulation without accounting for it, right? And so the intent was to account for it, but at the same time not make it overly burdensome to project teams. And so in the standard, it does allow for thermal bridging that accounts for less than 10% of heat transfer through an assembly to not be accounted for. So something like a shelf angle at a masonry wall now likely needs to be accounted for.
Thanks. So the deliverables, most of this falls on the envelope consultant. For the team in general, of course, we'll be looking for that checklist and OPR updates. Pretty much everything else falls on the commissioning, on the envelope commissioning agent to produce the plan, provide all of the comments, reviews. They'll be providing the functional performance testing spec, the envelope requirement spec to the design team. And then in the end, the envelope commissioning agent will provide the BECX record, which includes all of the various comments and reviews and everything from the project, and then also the maintenance manual to add to the O&M. And then this is a carryover, but we have Appendix E, the envelope commissioning matrix, is still there as a supporting document to help define all of this stuff. So that pretty much wraps it up for envelope.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about building system commissioning. This is going to feel very familiar process-wise to what Jeff just went through. The intent of our building system commissioning process is to have a fully functional building that meets the owner's requirements. And also, obviously, we want it to be efficient, but that efficiency is really baked in to this whole standard. So if we get the functional building that meets the OPR, then we should have an efficient building. That's the whole goal, or one of the big goals. So to comply, there is more work to do here with the OPR around how the building functions, and things like thermal comfort and air changes and things like that would all be documented in the OPR, and then there would be a response to the BOD. And we've been doing this for years and years, but we've made it official in this version that we do have to hire a qualified commissioning agent. We hire them just like the building envelope commissioning agent directly. The owner hires them directly and works directly for us. And then some of the notable changes are in this section are, again, similar to the building envelope section. We have created a matrix, and I can't remember if Jeff said this, but these matrices of how we see these level 1, 2, or fundamental enhanced, how we see them breaking apart are actually in the standard document with a lot more detail than we wanted to put on this presentation. But so we have a level 1 scope of commissioning, which is smaller, generally smaller, less expensive projects, and then a level 2, which is larger, more expensive projects, and would equate a lot to the LEED enhanced commissioning requirements. And then we've added some more definition around what we expect to happen for commissioning during warranty, which includes collecting that utility data to get to the EUI, the actual EUI measurement. The deliverables are basically the same as they are for building envelope. I think Jeff went through them really well. But at the end of the day, we're going to want that record, the commissioning record, which includes everything that happened above this on this list, with the exception of the performance standard checklist, which is new, and then the building system maintenance manuals. And so the guidance in here is following through the checklist, and then collecting all those CX, the final CX report, the rolled up CX reports at the end. Back to you, Jeff.
All right, let's talk metering. The next couple sections should go pretty quick. The biggest change in this updated performance standard compared to the old one is there's probably half the language regarding metering, and fewer sub-meters are required. But basically, the intent of this is we want to make sure that we have automated metering systems that provide interval data for all the measurable utilities and energy sources. And what that means really is building level metering that all consolidates together. It's all recording into a single head end. The old standard talked about that going into the control system. Of course, we want this to be brought into that single head end that makes sense for the owner and what they have already. If they have something, it could be something outside of the controls or within the controls. So we want the commissioning agent to commission that metering system and provide training. Sub-metering now has been kind of reduced to covering large loads for on renewables. Before there was the standard that said that on the power side we wanted to have lighting, HVAC loads, plug loads broken out, and that's no longer there. And we also have an exception built in for renovation work. And really it all comes down to, again, what the project team determines is most appropriate for the building and agency. And then related and moving on, the next section is fault detection and diagnostics. And here this kind of takes the place of the section in the old standard that was data points. We still have those data points in an appendix, and that kind of reviews and goes over what we expect in that area. But the actual standard here really talks about analytics. And I wrote in here, think SkySpark. I mean, that's how I think of this. But what we want is, depending on the complexity of the project, some level of analytics so we can look and see, so the owner can understand how systems are functioning. And we've broken this down into a few different levels. Level, let's see, I guess there's level, well, okay, base. In the base level, we're looking at just basically the utilities and what they're reporting. The next level would be commissioning level 2 at complexity, building complexity A through C, where we want to dig a little more into equipment. And then in the most complex buildings, things like a lab, healthcare, something where we really want to monitor what's going on, then we're looking at applying this to further down the stream to zone equipment, things like that. And like I said, we still have Appendix F that goes over the analytic points and tagging conventions. And again, this will be something that will be reviewed by the project team, the commissioning agent, the owner, the project team, to understand what's needed and what's valuable to the institution. And so the next section, and this is the last section of our performance part of the standard, is involves energy efficient equipment purchasing. This is pretty much the same as what we've had to this point. The intent is to purchase appliances, equipment, furnishings, various things, to promote energy efficiency and that stuff. So for anything that's purchased for the project, we want to look for Energy Star qualification, PPAC registration, meeting the DOE spent requirements and guidelines, or qualifying for utility incentives and rebates. And at least one of those things. And there again, we want this reflected in the OPR, and the deliverable is the checklist. That's as simple as that gets.
Oh, I went the wrong way. Hang on. The computer's acting up. There we go. Here we go. Okay, we're in the home stretch. I think we have 3 sections left to go. I just wanted to make a note about the fault detection section, that if it wasn't obvious, that ties directly into the building and the building system commissioning scope for warranty. When I was going over that, I said there's more detail about what we're expecting out of that warranty phase of commissioning, and the fault detection is kind of the backbone of that, just in case that wasn't clear. Okay, moving into material impact reduction. The intent here is to reduce the amount of stuff we send to landfill and to reduce the negative impact on our natural resources. Compliance includes building a building that allows for recycling within the building, having water bottle filling stations, construction waste management, construction air quality management, and material, some guidelines around like what we expect for material durability. That's things like when you're selecting a flooring system or something, we have a stated number of years in the standard that says we expect this like flooring to last X amount of years. So that I put no notable changes, but that's actually new. The material durability section is new. And all the details are there in the standard. So this does have a specific deliverable, which is Appendix G, the material tracking and information worksheet. And this is something that would really be on the responsibility for this would mostly be with the contractor. But that is not actually new. We've had this appendix ever since the first high performance building standard was written. I think now we baked in this process where we're actually going to start collecting these things, which we were not great at before. Section 5.7 is occupant wellness. And the intent here is we want a nice, healthy, productive work environment. I'm sure many of you have seen that chart that shows what the cost of a building is over its lifespan. And there's like a tiny sliver for the first construction costs and a slightly bigger section for the maintenance and O&M of the building over its life. And then the rest of the pie is the salaries that you pay to the employees that work in a building. And so that's really what this is about. If you build a space for people to work in, you want to make sure they're as productive as possible, because that's really the big cost of running a business is employees. So compliance is having indoor air quality design and management in the project. It includes making sure there's really nice daylights and views for the employees. It includes having environmental controls. That means, people can have some say in the comfort of their space from a thermal aspect. And there might be some work there with the BAS about how the building is sequenced. And then, having some focus on the employee health and productivity in the space. And so what does that mean, right? That means you're really sitting down with the owner and talking about things that the employees are going to like, whatever would make them the most productive, besides just sort of walls and desks and things like that. So this whole section is kind of a notable change. Having this focus on employee well-being wasn't particularly, like there was indoor air quality in the old standard and things like this, but really actually having a section devoted to this is new. But it aligns really well with what is generally going on in like design standards kind of across the board right now. Like there are some standards that are almost solely focused on this. So we definitely wanted to incorporate it. And the deliverables here are Appendix A, the project checklist, and then that Appendix G ties into this for the indoor air quality management. This is our last section. So this is exciting. This section, again, it existed in the old standard, but we, as the managers of the standard, weren't super great about having the focus on this at the end of the project. But now we really want to kind of tell the story with each project that we complete. So the purpose of this section is to tell everyone what a cool building you just designed and built, right? Because they are really amazing. The way to comply is to have building user engagement, which I'm going to jump down to the notable changes. So we now have this requirement for digital signage, as well as we have a plaque design that we can hang up when a building meets our performance criteria, to kind of help tell the story with the users of the building. And then there's a big focus on the facility management and training, because they have to maintain the building the way it was intended to be used. And that's actually one of the biggest reasons why buildings go into drift or things get changed, is the people who manage the building aren't given enough information about why a decision was made, or they don't understand a system, and so they just start making changes. And then 5 years down the road, you have almost a completely different building in some cases. So we really want to avoid that. And we want to tell the great stories about the really productive buildings that we build. The deliverables here are a project checklist. And there's, I forgot to put the guidance section on this one, but there is a template for that digital signage that project teams can refer to. And then the final deliverable is to actually do this, right? To actually complete the engagement and education activities, which this is really directed at owners, right? Like the commissioning agents help with this a little bit, but it's really the owners who have to take responsibility for this section, and make sure it happens at the end of a project. And then the last slide is our new signage. That's what our symbol is going to look like. We haven't quite decided like the materials for this yet, but we're looking at some options. But we're pretty excited to start branding our buildings a little better. So, questions? Oh, Jeff, can you check this? Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Hey, quick question for you on the recycling. I know I've done a couple of projects where recycling isn't an option in the area. I'm assuming there will be a way to account for that.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, if the local area doesn't have a recycling program, obviously that would change that requirement a little bit, although I would probably still advocate for, future recycling, maybe like account for less space for it, but, make sure the loading dock area could handle like having a recycling area in the future or something like that, because things change. And if you don't put it in the new build, it's very hard and awkward to add recycling in later. I actually worked in a couple of buildings like that back when I worked in New York City, and just like have recycling bins like literally like just in the middle of the hall or something. And so we'd want to account for it, but maybe give it a little less attention.
And sorry, I was probably addressing more of the construction waste side.
Yeah. If I wasn't actually aware that there was there were areas in Utah where you couldn't recycle construction waste. That's new information for me, but yes, we would have that conversation through the workshops and figure out the reasonable course of action. And this just brings up a great point in general, that we still have the language in the standard about getting variances for different sections of the standard. It's still the same process. You would, there is a variance form that DFCM has, it's on our website. You would submit the variance to Jeff, you know, after probably lots of discussion about it, but we do have a pathway for that. I would like to say, though, that one of the big misconceptions of this standard since it's existed from 2015 is that there is a concept that like sometimes a project comes along and the whole project is exempt from the whole standard. And that just isn't true. There's always some, even on very small projects, there's always some parts of the standard, usually commissioning, some of the design requirements that will always be followed. So if you've ever run across that, where you have had the thought like, oh, this project doesn't need to follow the high performance building standard, just wipe that from your brain, because that is not the truth.
And then my other question was just on documentation of materials.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure to what extent you're going. I know the new versions of LEED are very extensive and very time consuming. So when you said that there would not be any increase in fees, if the documentation is similar to the new LEED, there would definitely be a concern for fee increase.
Yep. We actually discussed this as we were drafting the new standard. The documentation that we're looking for is a really simple spreadsheet. It doesn't have the requirement to pull all those, like, I forgot what they're called. Whitney, help me out. The documents that prove.
We're not doing the environmental product declarations and the health product declarations. It's more aligned with sort of previous documentation in terms of material makeup, recycled content, and things that you're more familiar with, Brian, from previous LEED versions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Are there any questions in the chat, Jeff? It's hard for me to see the chat when I'm presenting.
Yeah, there were a couple. Greg Garcia asked, it says EUI model versus actual. Does the standard require sub-metering for lighting, plug, cooling, heating, domestic hot water, et cetera? This data would be helpful for investigating discrepancies. And so the standard, we have gone away from requiring the separate metering for lighting, plug loads, et cetera. You know, I think that can become burdensome if you have to have parallel distribution systems in a building. You know, we will be lacking probably some data that could help in that way. But really this all just comes down to the project team and the project and you know, in design, deciding what's going to make sense for the building. And then I think figuring out what the commissioning agent, the best way to identify what problems could be. I mean, it's really going to be a case-by-case scenario, I guess, looking for those discrepancies if and when they exist. The next.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, and then the next question is from Kevin Anderson. Will this? Oh, sorry, that's just the will the presentation slides be available? Yes, the presentation slides will be made available. And Sarah, I don't know if you have a better idea how that will be done, like through the website or some other way, but.
Yeah, I think probably it'll be through the website. But I would encourage everybody, like, we really, you know, we wanted to go through this with a reasonable amount of detail, but there's a lot of other detail in the standard. Don't use the presentation in lieu of actually reading the standard document. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, one thing I like to point out, following up in your comment there, Sarah, is one of the things that I very much appreciate about this new version of the standard is I feel like, you know, it's of course evolved over time, but I think we've been able to organize it in a way and present it in a way that I think is a little easier to read and digest than maybe it has been in the past. So.
And we have a question from Steve Haynes. Can you elaborate on the OPR BOD documentation which entities own these documents, and what is your vision for updating these as the project progresses? This is our critical documents, and without good leadership and ownership, I have seen them fall apart pretty quickly. Yes, great question and comment, Steve. So the OPR, the OPR management of the document belongs to the architectural team. And they obviously are going to write a lot of the OPR because they're the ones sitting down with the client, understanding the needs of the buildings and those requirements from the owner. However, they are going to get a lot of help from the whole project team. The commissioning agents are going to help write those sections of the OPR about building envelope requirements and system requirements. You know, but somebody does have to own it, to your point, and the most logical person or member of the team to do that is the architectural team. So I think that answers that question, but let me know if it doesn't, Steve.
Sarah, if I could just jump in there. I think the other thing that we had talked about was it does make sense for the design team to own it through the design process. And then the documentation gets switched over to the commissioning authority sort of through the construction process as we submit, as you know. We have the OPR, the BOD that follows that both of those documents are owned by the design team through the design process and then are provided to the commissioning authority through the construction.
Yes, right. And because the commissioning agents are the ones who are checking a lot of those requirements are being met, but they don't check all of them. Like the commissioning agents aren't gonna, you know, check the durability of the flooring system or whatever.
That's true.
So, yeah, so there will be some still, you know, just the general what the architectural and engineering team would do through their regular construction administration stuff is going to be happening as well. And if they did come across something, you know, I mean, we all know sometimes weird stuff happens, the wrong thing gets ordered and installed, and then that would need to be documented by the architectural team, even at the construction phase. But that's a good clarification. A lot of the construction phase work with OPR goes to the commissioning agents. Probably 90% of it.
I'd also like to add that, you know, my vision for a lot of these documents is that, of course, they're very collaborative things, and I would like for the architect to, you know, place them on a open shared drive or place where they can be accessed by the project team and easily shared and reviewed and updated through the process. And then, I mean, on the comment about them falling apart easily or quickly, of course, that's one of my main concerns too. And so I want to make sure that they are indeed being reviewed throughout the process and not just forgotten about as they can be. But I think just having them shared centrally and open, you know, and easily collaborated with will be key to that.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, to Jeff's point, so the document does start and get sort of shepherded through by the design team, but we, DFCM, have a responsibility as well, right? So Jeff is going to be working with everybody, you know, engaging with that process, like you just said. And we also expect our construction project managers to know these requirements and help make sure that they're happening as well. What other questions do folks have? Well, I would be happy to give everybody a half an hour of their day back. So let me maybe just close by saying a lot of people who helped write this new version of the standard and then review it are on this meeting. And so a big thanks to you. This was really a sort of a community project. And I think we have ended up with a great standard, and we're going to end up with really great buildings. So thank you to all of you. This is exciting to have this new update done. And along those lines, this is meant sort of to Dave Griffin's comment about what if the EUIs aren't really working out. the intent here is that we do continue to learn and revise the standard, moving forward at some reasonable interval. This update took about 2 years to write, so we might need a better, smaller process, like take little chunks, smaller chunks at a time. But we always want to get feedback from all of you about what's working and what's not, and we're always willing to have those conversations and make changes that seem appropriate and necessary moving forward. Lorraine, you started your video. Do you have a question? No? Okay. Okay.
Question for William Gertzen for Peath Engineering. Maybe you already mentioned this. Will there be a new energy analysis report to fill out for state projects that we can download to our office, computers and that for doing an energy analysis based on the new standards, or just throwing us out, I guess. But.
Yeah, so I think the answer there is, so there's still a requirement for a regular energy model, which we hired that energy modeler independently and to do that work. But the new thing that maybe is what you want to go look at, William, is the Appendix D, that tool that Chris Cox walked through kind of halfway through. That is a document that sort of explains and helps with the process of deciding what the EUI target is and how to document it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, Jeff? Yeah, so Dave pointed out that many people may have joined late. So just on the way out, we can keep this open for a minute. If you can put in the chat your name and company, so we have a list of who was in attendance today, that would be very helpful. Other than that, thanks everybody for tuning in today. And I'm not the type to really show a lot of excitement about things, but I really am very excited about this standard. And I'm really excited to work with all of you on these projects. And, I'm hoping that this can be a really good collaborative process that we can engage in and see some really good results. I'm excited moving forward and here to help. And, as always, Sarah and I are here to help with everything high performance standard related. So if you have questions, anything, please ask. Okay, I see a lot of people adding their names to the chat. So I think Jeff and I are going to say goodbye, but him and I will hang out for a little while because we have to download the chat and I got to figure out the recording thing or whatever. So we'll be here for a few minutes if you want to hang out or you think of a question. But otherwise, have a great day and thanks again.
Hey, Sarah, Jeff, Vince, how are you guys?
Hey, Vince. Just
hey,
about awesome. What's up, man?
Hey, I got a quick question. So I just happened to be on your website, and I presume that that's going to get updated because Appendix A is still the old analytics point tagging and data.
Yeah,
yes.
Good point for the remaining 30 or so people to hear. The appendix material is in the process of being updated on the website. And
okay. Okay. And is that analytic point going to be updated as well? Because I know that in the process of the large project that everybody's pretty much working on, we came up with, we kind of refined that points and tagging spreadsheet because we found a lot of discrepancies in that from tab to tab.
Yeah, we were planning on putting the new points and tagging spreadsheet up with this version.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, for anybody who's left, if you want any of these things before we figure out our website, just email me or Jeff and we can email them all to you.
Okay. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And
Thanks, Vince.
Enjoy the snow.
Okay, Jeff, I'm going to turn the recording off.